All right, today's mini lesson is about text structures. This is how nonfiction writers organize their ideas to help communicate their ideas effectively. So you should have a paper copy of the notes in front of you. Make sure your name is written in the very top box. These are set up Cornell note style, so you're familiar with this. On the left-hand side, I'm going to list questions and vocabulary that are important for this lesson. And on the right-hand side, you're going to fill in the information for your notes. And just to kind of give you a brief overview, we're going to start with the question, what is a text structure? Then we're going to look at sequence, compare and contrast, cause and effect, problem solution, and finally description. So there are 5 different text structures that we're going to be focusing on for nonfiction. So let's begin with the first section. What is a text structure? You're going to write in the information in the blanks that's green on my slides. So let me go ahead and present that to you. So the first question, what is a text structure? Let's talk about what the word structure means. So you write the word that's in green in your notes. A structure is like a building or a framework. It could be something physical, like the classroom we're sitting in with the 4 walls, the ceiling, and the floor. That's a structure. But sometimes it's a framework that you might write out on paper. For example, when we wrote our TDA essays, the structure of that essay was how it was built, how we put it together, introduction, body, conclusion. So that's all a structure is. It's just a building or a framework. When we talk about text structure, it refers to how a piece of text is built. Think about our articles of the week. There are certain ways the authors organize their information. So we just call those ways to organize text structures. Writers use these different structures to build, obviously, their writing. And finally, each text structure explains ideas in a different way. And there are 5 different ways we're going to look at nonfiction texts using these structures. So make sure you have all 4 green words in your notes for the first section. The first text structure is called sequence. Sequence explains how things happen in time order, okay? First, next, last. Sometimes I'll use the phrase chronological order. Chrono means time, okay? So it's just anything by time. So if I say sequence and then in the next sentence I say chronological order, they mean the same thing. It's just 2 different ways to say the same thing. They're synonyms. You will know that you are reading a text in sequence because you're going to see these transition words. So you need to write these words in your notes. Let me make this disappear. So they're the words first, next, later, then, and finally. Pause the video if you need to catch up. Otherwise, we're going to move on to the tiny text that's in your notes. So I'm going to go to the tiny text. There's our tiny text. So we're going to practice. This is a paragraph that's written in sequence text structure. And I know that because there are some transition words in this paragraph that show me its sequence. What I want you to do is to listen and read very carefully and see if you can't find and circle the 4 sequence transition words in this paragraph. And if you forgot what they are, just look right above in your blanks, okay? Have you ever made macaroni and cheese? It's simple. First, boil some water and make some macaroni. Then make your cheese sauce. After the cheese sauce is ready, mix it with the macaroni. Bake the entire thing in the oven. Finally, it's time to eat. Now I'm hungry. Now I want some mac and cheese. So what I want you to do is hopefully you notice those 4 sequence transition words and you circled them. I'm going to let you pause the video if you haven't done that yet, and then I'm going to tell you what the answers are. So the answers are, you should have circled the word first, you should have circled the word then, after, and finally, the word right here at the end. All 4 of those words show that this paragraph was organized by sequence or time or chronological order, however you want to say it. First, then, after, and finally. The last thing I want you to do for the sequence section is I want you to sketch out the organizer in my presentation in this white space right here. Let me show you the organizer. Because I know a lot of my students are visual learners just like me, I like to use visuals to represent the ideas. So this is the visual. I want you to draw an arrow, a big fat arrow, and inside the arrow, boxes with 1, 2, and 3. And this is a nice visual to help you remember that sequence means in order by events, the first, second, and third, for example. You don't have to add all this detail. Don't do that. Just a little sketch of an arrow with the numbers. You're good to go. So pause the video. Make sure you have all this information in your notes. And when you're ready, we'll move on to the next one. The next text structure is called compare and contrast. So in your notes, remember everything in green is what you're going to write in your notes. Compare, when I say the word compare, I want you to what I really want you to do is I want you to find similarities between two things. And when I say contrast, I want you to find what they don't have in common, what makes them different from each other. So compare means similarities, and contrast means differences. When you organize a compare-contrast text, I want you to use a Venn diagram. Let me make that green for you. A Venn diagram, and that's what you see over to the right. The two overlapping circles, we call that a Venn diagram. There it is up there too. Finally, the transition words that I need you to take note of are similar, both, also. Now those three words show compare, similarities, what they have in common. I also want you to write down different, however, on the other hand, and while. Those transition words show differences or how two things are contrasted. Pause the video if you need a little bit more time to write those in your notes and then come back. So what we're going to do now is we're going to read a tiny text and we're going to see what a compare contrast text sounds like, what it looks like, and then I want you to circle any transition words you see in this tiny text. I'm right here on the back of the first page. The cardinal and the cedar waxwing are two common birds. Okay, we've got two birds. We're going to compare and contrast them, what they have in common and what they don't have in common. Both have crests on their heads. Both are common at bird feeders. But the birds have some differences. The male cardinal is a bright red, while the waxwing is brown. The cedar waxwing often migrates from place to place. On the other hand, the cardinal stays in one place year after year. So that paragraph uses the compare and contrast text structure. Hopefully you noticed some of those transition words. You were circling them as I read. Give yourself a minute to do that. Pause the video, and I'm going to come back and give you the answers. All right, so we're looking for 5 transition words that show compare and contrast. Hopefully you circled the word both, and then the other both that's in the next sentence. That's 2. You want to circle the word differences. That's the third one. While, that's number 4, showing contrast or what they don't have in common. And finally, the phrase on the other hand, that is showing how they're different as well. So those are the 5 transition words for this tiny text. The last thing I want you to do with compare and contrast is I want you to draw the little organizer in the white space. So let's look at the organizer for compare and contrast. That's the Venn diagram. So if you would just draw 2 overlapping circles. You might want to just shade in where it's overlapped just to show the compare, and then leave the other parts white to show the contrast so you can see the difference. Okay, you don't have to add these words in. Just the organizer is good. And once you have all the information from this slide in your notes, we'll move on to the next text structure. The next text structure is called cause and effect. And I know from speaking to your history teachers that you talk a lot about cause and effect in social studies class. One event creates an effect, and then that moves on and creates a cause for another effect, and so forth, like dominoes falling. So sometimes a writer will want to explain how one event leads to another. That's your first blank. Sometimes the author will begin with the effect and then tell the cause later. So sometimes authors like to do it in reverse. They'll tell you the result, and then they'll go back and tell you what caused that result. Finally, the transition words to look for are cause and effect. So, because of, led to, therefore, as a result, consequently, that's a good word. That means that means like an effect. And the last one is so. I know I have so up there twice. Go ahead and write it twice. It's okay if you have it twice. Pause the video, make sure you've got all your blanks filled in, and then we're going to look at the tiny text. So the tiny text for cause and effect is right here. And we're going to be looking for 3 of those transition words in this example. Notice how there's cause and effect, how one thing creates an effect for something else, one event. So the night snowstorm had many effects. People were out shoveling snow from their sidewalks. The power lines were draped with ice. Snow plows drove down every street. As a result, children were the happiest of all. The unexpected snow caused school to be canceled. All right, cause was the snowstorm, and then it listed all the different effects because of the snowstorm. You should have found 3 transition words that show cause and effect. If you haven't done that, you can pause the video, look for them, and I'm going to give you the answers when you're ready. So the first word you should have circled was effects in the first sentence. Then you should have circled as a result, that phrase right there. And the last one is caused down here. Those are the 3 transition words for that tiny text. And the last thing I want you to do is to draw the organizer for cause and effect in the white space. Pull that back up for you. And the organizer is an arrow, a big fat arrow that kind of touches and into this, I call it a starburst, okay? So if you would draw a big fat arrow and then draw what it looks like it's creating like an effect with this starburst kind of little tiny explosion, if you want to think about it that way. This would be the cause, the arrow, and the effect would be our little starburst here. Again, you don't have to add all this detail. Just the shapes is fine. Pause the video, give yourself a chance to make sure you've got all the information for cause and effect, and then we'll move on to the next text structure. All right, the next text structure is problem and solution. Okay? Sometimes an author will want to explain a problem and then show one or more solutions. Make sure you add that to your notes. These are transitions for problem. So I typed in the transition words here. I just want you to add that these all have to do with problem. So if you see the words difficulty, struggle, uncertainty, worry, threat, and trouble, you know all of those words have to do with a problem. These are all associated with ideas of problems. And then you might see some transition words for solution, possibility, hope, bright spot, answer, and future. Those have much more positive connotation, don't they? Because solutions are good things, positive connotation. Problems are bad things. Not necessarily all the time. Sometimes problems can lead to really good things, so they're not necessarily bad as long as well, I digress. Let's go back. So they have a negative connotation because problems usually are negative. Make sure you have all the green words in your notes. We're going to look at the tiny text. And the tiny text is right here, okay? So you're going to be looking for 4 transition words that show problem and solution in this tiny text. Park School had a terrible problem. Every day at recess, students would argue over the slides, causing trouble. Teachers had to spend time every day taking care of the arguments. Finally, one teacher came up with a great solution. They bought another set of slides that was a bright spot everyone could enjoy. Right? Pause the video if you haven't found the 4 transition words yet. See if you can find those on your own, and then come back for the answers. All right, so you should have found the 4 transitions are problem, circle that, trouble, yep, trouble's one of them, solution, and bright spot. So you can see how it's kind of negative at first and then it turned positive. So that when it feels negative and it turns positive, we call that problem and solution structure. The last thing you're going to do is you're going to draw the organizer for problem and solution in the white box, in the white part of the box. And that is going to be this question mark. That represents the problem with a little arrow leading to a light bulb. And the light bulb represents the solution, like aha, like aha moment too. So problem leads to solution. Go ahead and draw that. Again, you don't have to add all the detail, just the shapes will do. Okay? And then make sure you have all the information in your notes. Pause the video if you need to, and we'll move on to the last text structure. All right, the last text structure is called description. In this kind of writing, the author describes a topic with much detail. You want to add topic to your notes. Often the text is broken into sections, each with a central idea and details that elaborate on it. So topic, central idea, and details. These are 3 terms we've been practicing now for several weeks. And then I want you to look for these transition words. I know they're yellow, but they should be green. I want you to write these in your notes. So if you see, for example, to illustrate, such as, and most important, those are all key transition words for description text structure. Pause the video, make sure you have all this in your notes, and then we're going to take a look at the tiny text. All right, the tiny text for description, it's right here. And there's only 2 transition words to look for this one, okay? The pond was a beautiful place to visit. For example, the falling leaves of all different colors decorated the surface of the water. Visions such as small wildflowers growing at the edge of the water made the trip memorable. So that's a descriptive paragraph, okay? The pond, we're describing what the pond looked like. And the transition words that you should have circled were, for example, that's adding description, and here it is. It should be the word such as, such as. So for example, and such as, both of those transition words are showing that there's details to follow, details to describe, in this case, the pond. Make sure you have those circled. And the last thing you're going to do is draw the organizer for the description text structure. Let me go back to it. So it's a web, and I'm sure that you have drawn webs before. And I like the different shapes in this web. So first you're going to have like a rectangle in the middle. That's going to be for your main topic. And then I want you from the corners to draw 4 circles, each with arrows, or you could just use a straight line, that's fine too. And then from the sides, I want you to draw little clouds to show the different um, ways that you can describe a topic. Okay? We're going to talk more about this organizer later, but go ahead and just kind of sketch that out. Again, don't have to add all the detail. As long as you have the shapes, you're good to go. All right, that's the end of your notes for today. When you are finished, I need you to raise your hand and I will come by and collect those. And you receive classwork credit today for going through all that. That's fantastic. And if you need to rewind this video, if you have any missing spots in your notes, you certainly, I encourage you to do that. You want to make sure you have all the information covered. That's the end of today's lesson. Make sure that you remember there are 5 different types of text structures for nonfiction. We have sequence, compare and contrast, cause and effect, problem and solution, and finally, description. Good job, y'all.